It wasn't long before they were all up, alert, and waiting to get going. As I was getting the guys up, our forest friend made a giant pot of oatmeal for all of us on the stove. The home smelled of maple and rehydrated apples. A few guys went out to scout and get firewood, but they were back soon to enjoy breakfast. I let our generous host know I was thankful for the food, and he nodded, enjoying some himself. In not a lot of time, we were eating and enjoying breakfast all together. Even the timid girl had got back out of bed to have breakfast next to her sturdier counterpart. She saw her friend eating, realizing it was okay, and got a bowl herself. As I ate my breakfast in silence, and as everyone made small chat, I couldn't get something to quit nagging my mind, though. Where did these marauders sleep? Were they still close? Did they figure out a way to open the gates? Back in the forest area? I don't think they did. I think they had some people come get them. They were probably sleeping in that last town that we'd gone around. They wouldn't have gone back to the other group's home base because they would have told them about the food. They maybe even joined forces. That'd be what? On the optimistic end, maybe like 150 people left. They join up with their local group and let them know about what's going on. Maybe that entire raiding party would join. Equally likely if you would decide to call it and stay behind. Maybe try the new life out here in peace. Maybe try to legitimately coexist. I heard the birds chirping. I saw the sun start to crest the horizon. It was finally morning. My guess was that we helped the forest man whittle down the local psycho population, and he helped us survive the night. It was a good morning. Chapter 22. So much for peace and quiet. Morning, day 3. We enjoyed the sun coming up and the birds chirping, and basically as much oatmeal as we could eat. Sitting there in silence. Still lots of ammo in our health and food in our tummies. Our forest host had put out the candles since we could see by daylight now. Now that I could see the living room in natural light, I started my normal routine of familiarizing myself with the area I was in. I looked through the glass into all the frogs in their respective aquariums. There were red-striped frogs and green-striped frogs and yellow-striped frogs. They were all in different aquariums, hopping around and being happy. I imagined each color representing a different effect the mutated frogs had. A blistering one, a stunning one, and a healing one, maybe? I looked around the room more and noticed an oddly suspicious familiar key hanging on the wall as a sort of a trophy. I'd played with the idea of asking about the key until we suddenly heard gunfire far off in the distance, several miles away. We all started subconsciously counting the bullets being expended and thinking about the possible distance. It was mag after mag, so many shotgun blasts that we lost count. Some big revolvers too. I imagined in my head that the marauders sent scouts to the front gate and then all around the village. It didn't take long for the marauder scouts to notice the van parked at the other entrance to the village. They'd report back, both exhausted and with renewed vigor, that they had finally found the van. The marauders would have tried to be diplomatic with the villagers about wanting the van back. They'd try to say it was theirs. The villagers would explain it was theirs fair and square. There'd be a person with the marauder diplomat that the villager chief would recognize. The villagers finally having the nerve to get him down from his run-ins with us the night before. The village chief would recognize someone in the group as someone who was usually at the trading post but suspiciously hadn't been there during the ambush. Accusations would be thrown. The chief realized that he'd been conned and was after the wrong people. The village chief would put two and two together, and they would think that the marauders were there to wipe them out, like they had everyone else at the trading post storage facility. The village chief would have done some kind of obscure hand gesture, people in Overwatch, unseen in trailers, windows to the hills on each side of the road, would have shredded the forward group on command before they had a chance to react. Some bullets would have missed. A few marauders would have got away. The main group would have surged forward, two huge groups clashing. The marauders taking heavy losses, trying to assault the heavily fortified position. A few would have got to the van and opened the doors in vain, only to find the van empty. Expecting food, of course. The villagers inside, more than happy to greet them with shotguns. The villagers were simply happy they had a new van, even if they couldn't drive it anywhere. The deaths chalked up as acceptable losses, with the majority only having been knocked out by amphibian toxin. Before. I imagine the villagers taking the marauders who couldn't flee and either tossing them in a pig farm we passed by or tying them to trees around the perimeter as reminders. The loot they got would have been more made up for the trouble that both we and the marauders gave them. All would be forgiven. They wouldn't mess with us again. It turns out most of the crazy hill villagers we shot when they attacked us, the frog shaman must have healed with healing frogs in good faith. So it was mostly forgiven, as they were able to wake up and defend against the marauders in time. If they were cool with us, we'd be cool with them, and we wouldn't mess with them again. Hopefully they never mess with children again either, in fear we could come back and smite them, or the frog shaman could take them out with more lethal means. Maybe he would leave blaster frogs on the chainsaw guy so they could see what he could do if he really wanted. I imagine frogs coming out of the holes I blasted in chainsaw guy, and the frogs exploding on anyone who got close. Just like that, the gunfire stopped. We heard vehicles, or rather, felt the vehicles driving away. In the quiet, there was a certain vibration about it, and that was that. The marauders that fled wouldn't try to attack the villagers again. Maybe 50 left, max. Some would try to go back to the city-state, and they wouldn't make it. They got chewed up by the local groups they passed by, not having their imposing force anymore. The rest would just stay and augment the local like-minded population, just enough to make a balanced community. Whatever existing leadership from the marauders could try to struggle with the locals' group leadership remained. They could never agree on anything for very long, always having to exclude each other in their giant inclusive groups to the lowest common denominator. Would they take this opportunity to truly expunge traditional rule like they'd always talked about, or would they return to a self-imposed totalitarian regime that they claimed to hate so much? Only time would tell. Hopefully they can find a system where they finally start leaving everyone alone, maybe eventually come back to the table with the rest of us, like so many of their fringe excluded groups had already done. Regardless, we all sat there in silence, all thinking the same thing. We were safe, but more importantly, our stronghold was safe. Sure, there'd be new threats, but we survived this one. I got the feeling, though, like the mission still wasn't over. We didn't just make it up all this way to drag the marauders away. RXO spoke up. We appreciate your hospitality, but we need to go. There was a long pause, as if everyone was considering options. The forest man spoke. Okay, Din, I understand. He thought for a second and walked off, disappearing into a closet. There was some rustling around, and a few moments later came out with a pair of child-sized coats. I think these fit the girls well. They belong to my... And he trailed off. Please take the goats, the forest man concluded. There was obvious pain in his eyes. The girls had already had them halfway on, already having decided somehow which one was going to wear which. One was purple camo and one was snow camo. They looked like little troopers. This made them extra happy because they were wearing camo like us now. They were like a part of the team. The bolder of the two, now in white camo, ran and picked up the shield. She raised it in the air and let loose a little howl. It was still petite, but showed her spirit. Her timid friend cheered and watched her in admiration. Dude, I wouldn't go try to get your shield back. She might kick your ass. I thanked the armorer for his levity and nodded in agreement. RXO took the opportunity to speak again. Thanks again for your hospitality. I hope we cross paths with you again. You've been a true friend. They checked the wood pile and left him completely full of wood for the fires he would need to keep Going to stay warm. Proud to call you all my brothers. We all nodded, with several versions of likewise as the response. The team all started funneling out, with 2 girls rushing over to give the forest man a hug before bounding back out the door. When everyone was out, I asked, hypothetically, any more of these groups we need to worry about? He said that was the only one nearby that he knew of. I thanked him, but it seemed like there was still something unspoken that needed to be said. Just something different about you. Yeah, I get that a lot, I responded, without even thinking about it. You are destined for great things. I nodded, and he left me with some parting words. Just because you were born in a cemetery and your mother was a witch, that doesn't mean you have to have a foot in the grave at all times. I responded that I didn't know anything else. I didn't know any other way. He nodded as if he thoroughly understood. Nothing more needed to be said. I thanked him and exited his warm home into the cold.